Overwatch, Paladins, and Battleborn. 3 games that lie in the genre known as the hero shooter, and 3 titles that came out very near to one another. 8 years later, Overwatch and Paladins are still around in some form or another, and at some point have thrived. The third title, on the other hand, Battleborn, did not survive. What makes these 3 titles in particular pretty interesting to talk about together is that they're all considered hero shooters, but Overwatch and Paladins are pretty similar to each other. Battleborn, however, was quite a bit different. Although the hero shooter does have some roots in the character-heavy design of MOBAs, such as League of Legends or Dota or Smite, Overwatch and Paladins simply are not MOBAs. They're basically class-based shooters like Team Fortress, but with way more classes, and those classes are characters instead. But Battleborn was a full-on MOBA, and everything that entails. Leveling up in matches, fighting minions, defeating turrets and towers and stuff, and pushing for ground against another team. Unfortunately, it seems that the combination of first-person shooter or third-person shooter with MOBA is cursed and will never see the light of day. Or if it does, then it'll die a very quick death. Battleborn died within a couple of months. Maybe this specific genre meld is cursed, or maybe the people who are making these games just don't know how to make them good or make them readable. Battleborn failed for a number of reasons, which I will not get into in this video because I'm sure that's been done to death. But what is important to say about it is that once Battleborn died, there really wasn't anything to take its place. Even though it was considered by many people to be a hero shooter, it simply wasn't just a hero shooter. It was something different, and when it died, there was nothing left. But a year later, with very little marketing and a lot of development hell, a new game came out. One that captured the hearts and imaginations of just about anybody who set their hands on it. That game was called Gigantic.
Huge!
Hey, no, we're not doing that joke again. We did it. We overdid that joke last time. Just cut it out. Gigantic is a third-person action game. Very much in the realm of a hero shooter, but also very much in the realm of a MOBA. It takes more of the MOBA design than Overwatch and Paladins does, and makes something brand new. Gigantic is one of the most fresh and unique multiplayer-only games that, in my opinion, has come out in the last 10 years. Before Gigantic, I had never seen anything like it, and after Gigantic, I still haven't. I and many other people who fell in love with this game were devastated whenever it died. But there were really good reasons for the death of Gigantic. Again, I'm not going to go over all of those reasons in this video because they're not really important to what we're going to talk about today. And it's already been well documented because this happened 7 years ago. But despite its death, there have been many people who remember that game fondly. That includes me and many people in my community. 7 years ago, like everybody else, I was on a big hero shooter kick, and when Gigantic came out, I played it, I loved it, I made a video about it, and then I kept playing it until it inevitably died. Because of its unique gameplay, it had a pretty devout cult following, and despite that, it couldn't gather a critical mass of players to survive. But that cult following gave the game an opportunity that 7 years later, it was finally able to realize. At the beginning of April in 2024, something magical happened, something unexpected, something that you never see in this industry. This failed game has risen from the dead and given a second chance at life. But maybe that was a bad idea. Gigantic Rampage Edition is a mess. At least at the time that I'm making this video. I wasn't even sure that I was going to make a video about this, but it's just so baffling how this company decided to handle the re-release of Gigantic that I had to talk about it. And to keep things organized for me and for you, I'm going to go ahead and put a lot of the gripes that I have and that I see as relatively objective truths about why this game is going to fail again in a conveniently numbered list. So here's the first and possibly biggest reason why I think that Gigantic Rampage Edition is completely doomed, and that's because Gigantic 7 years ago was a free-to-play title with an optional buy-in and a games-as-a-service model. Now, I know many people hate this kind of thing, and like you, I'm pretty sick of being milked for pretty much everything that I have for games that I like. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to hero shooters and when it comes to MOBAs especially, these games have the expectation of being free. But for some reason or another, Gigantic Rampage Edition is a $20 buy-in to even play at all. 7 years ago, if you wanted to play the game and could run it on your machine, you could just download it. You could just download it, play it, give it a try, and then maybe because of that, you'll spend a little bit of money. Maybe you want this hero that you like that you don't have in your hero library, so you buy it and now it's yours. And maybe you really like this hero and you really like this game, buy some premium currency so you can have some cool skins for it. And the skins in this game are absolutely beautiful and incredible and just way better than a lot of games that offer skins, but that's beside the point. The point is, the game used to be free and now it's buy to play. And even though there are many objective reasons why being buy to play is so much better than free to play, those better aspects pale in comparison to the amount of people that being free to play can bring in. Like it or not, games that are online only live and die based on their population. The more competitive a game is, the more important a healthy population is. I covered this in my Loving Dying Games video a few years ago. But when it comes to a skill-based, multiplayer-only competitive game, the effect of a small population is a snowball of doom. Because here's what happens. You have this game with a small population, and inevitably, people who want to play this game are going to buy in or download it, and then they're going to try to play it. They click the matchmaking button, and then they're thrust into a match with a bunch of people. Now, for a new player, the first few matches are always going to be a crapshoot. Some games might be completely disrespectful and place you against bots, but other games might dump you right in the middle, forcing you to swim in the deep end with all of the middle-of-the-road average skill players. As a new player, you're probably expecting to lose your first couple of matches, and that's fine. Matchmaking systems will always require an amount of games before you're able to actually be matched with people who are equal to your skill level. It's just the nature of the system. But once you do fall into that bracket where you belong, then that's where you find all the best games, that's where you find the most competition, and that's where you find a relatively balanced experience. There might still be people who know more than you, and there might still be people who know less than you, but you're all learning from each other, and that's what makes it work. In a non-healthy game, what happens is that these brackets of skill level end up expanding. These games want to get you into a match as quickly as possible so you don't get bored and you don't complain about the match queues. But what could happen in a low population game is that you're matched up against either people that are way below your skill level or way above your skill level. And then what happens as a result of that is that one of these teams gets absolutely run over, while the other team just has no challenge. And there is a subset of people in this world who love running over lesser skilled players, and there is a subset of people in this world who don't care if they get run over, they're just happy to play. But that's not most of the population. I think in general, people want a relatively competitive match. And even though there are probably more people who would be okay with running over the enemy team, there's a far less amount of people who would be okay with being run over and over again. So if one of these players, after they start feeling relatively comfortable with the game to where they know kind of what they're doing, if they run into one of these matches where they're just getting trounced over and over again, maybe 5 or 6 matches in a row, what are they going to do? They're not going to want to play anymore. They're going to move on to something that's more fun. It's not fun to get beaten into the sand every single time that you turn on the game. That's just a fact. So as a game's population dwindles, this becomes more of a commonplace occurrence. And then as the game's population continues to plummet, the issue begins to snowball on itself and grow. It'll grow to the point to where these super skilled, hyper-competitive veteran players who love this game and spend many hours a day on it will get matched up against these more casual players who might be okay at the game and might occasionally have some good plays, but they don't really stand a chance against these other players who are clearly much better than them. And when this starts happening more and more to these other players, these lesser skilled players who might still love the game just as much as these more veteran, higher skilled players, if they just keep losing, then they're going to stop having fun too, and then they're going to quit. And then you can just kind of see how this will continue to snowball until the only people that are left are the people that will just trounce over every single team that they come up against. good competitive matches become much more rare, and it's just harder to keep people interested in the game because there's no incentive to keep playing if there's not any fun to be had. And I know it kind of sounds like I'm putting blame on the higher skilled players, but it's not their fault. What are they going to do? Sandbag just so the other team can have a more competitive experience? No, that's not competitive for anybody. That's just sandbagging, and that sucks. It's just a natural thing that happens with a dwindling player base. But something that could help bring in more players is just being free. It doesn't matter how many streamers you have playing the game, there is a massive audience of players who A, either cannot afford to spend $20 on a game that they don't know that they're going to enjoy and that they don't know is going to be around for a long time, or B, just don't want to take the gamble. Maybe they have a MOBA that they already like and they're not going to spend $20 on something that should, by all accounts, be free. Right? I think the most frustrating thing about this is that at some level, I do kind of like the free-to-play experience. There is some fun into playing a game that you like and collecting a currency or a premium currency that trickles in over time to be able to afford a hero that you wanted to play, or a hero that you tried out on a free rotation and decided that you really liked. It can also help gamify the metagame, giving you like little daily quests to complete because you want to complete those quests for the currency. And of course, those daily quests, love them or hate them, do incentivize people to come on and play more. Achievement systems incentivize people to grind for those achievements so they can earn more currency, so they can play the characters that they like, with the skins that they like, or explore the game in different ways that they might not have explored before. And a lot of those systems are still in the game, but because you already get all of the heroes basically for free just for playing the game, and just for buying the game, what incentive do I have to come back and do these daily quests? Skins? I mean, they're relatively cheap in this version of the game, so no, that's not really an incentive. And the most confusing thing about this choice of making this a buy-to-play game is that they could have had their cake and eaten it too. I think most of the people that bought this game are the people who loved the game in 2017. Those are going to be the same players who probably would have spent happily $20 on a hero pack or some sort of starter pack that can give them a boost and maybe give them a lot more heroes than the free-to-play players would. You gotta remember, these are the players that were around 7 years ago and have been wanting this game to come back for years. Of course, they're going to spend a little extra money to try and support this game and keep it afloat for this foreseeable future. But unfortunately, without any of the free-to-play players, which again would heavily boost the population, it's doomed. I spent way too long on the first point, so let's move on to the second point. Gigantic had problems in 2017, like high system requirements for the time period, which locked a lot of lower potato computer having people out of playing the game, which again lowered the population. And because Microsoft was involved and pretty much always makes the worst decision possible, it was for a period of time a Windows exclusive. But at least the game ran pretty smoothly. I didn't experience or hear about very many crashes or frame drops or anything like that, but somehow the game now feels worse than it did 7 years ago. There's some minor things like terrain issues in some of the maps. You're bumping into things that don't exist, and it's kind of frustrating. One of the maps has like little foliage decals blocking shots from my ranged mage character, making it extremely difficult for me to pressure from a distance on a certain map. But as frustrating as some of those things can be, they're not a big deal. But what is a big deal is the performance issues that this game has that it didn't have in 2017. One major performance issue that this game has, which it did have in the past, is that it's running at a locked 60 frames per second. 7 years ago, this was perfectly fine. But, in current year, 60 frames per second doesn't cut it for a lot of people anymore. It's not a huge deal for me, but I can see where people are coming from with that. That has also lowered the population because, a lot of people just don't want to deal with low frame rates. And that's their prerogative. But to be fair, players that can't or won't play with 60 frames per second weren't playing the game anyway, so they're not really a loss in the population. But what is a loss in the population is issues with the bots. Now, this first issue has already been patched out, but it was around for like 3 weeks, and it was so annoying to deal with. And that's the fact that if you leave, you're backfilled with a bot. It's kind of what you would expect. Being down a man sucks, but at least a bot can help you out as long as it doesn't feed. Newsflash, they feed, and that's really bad. But even worse than feeding is when the bots become immune to damage, you cannot kill them, and they attack both teams indiscriminately. It doesn't matter which team the bot was supposed to be on, it's just going to go on a killing spree, attacking anybody in its path. Obviously, this is going to be a huge detriment to the competitive nature of this game, and you're basically babysitting this thing that can't die, that you can't do anything about, other than dragging it somewhere else. Maybe using it as a weapon against the other team if you can survive long enough against it and the onslaught of the enemy's players. There's also an issue with bots getting on jump pads on airships and then just like not going anywhere, hitting the jump pad many times, and then just kind of lagging the server out, destroying it, and also destroying the competitive nature of the match. Both of these things are extremely bad. I don't think the jump pad thing has been patched out yet or fixed yet, but the fact that either of these things were around as long as they were in a game that they expected us to spend $20 on, let me remind you, is completely unacceptable. It completely destroys the match, makes it feel like a completely different game because you're trying to babysit this stupid little bot that can't die, and it just makes the game less fun as a result. And because this game has so many issues, especially for PS5 players, where they're just constantly crashing, and even PC players are crashing, and they're not able to get back into the match, you're ending up with bots in a lot of these matches. It's not a good look, it's not a good experience, and because of that, it's another thing that's chasing people away. Why play a game that doesn't want to be played? Number 3, the lobby and post-match UI are genuinely worse than they were 7 years ago. I have footage of what the UI looked like 7 years ago. It was expressive, it was smooth, it was well animated, it had good sound design. And now it's this sterile, kind of buggy mess. It's just white, kind of blinds you if you're in a dark room. And after the match, before you can even see the scoreboard or see how you did, it just bombards you with so many notifications of how close you are to finishing the next tier of about 15 different quests. You don't have to show me every little thing one by one, developers. Do this in like a batch. Like maybe give me the notifications for the important ones or the ones that are actually completed and give me a reward, but not every single one. This is just annoying. Granted, you can skip it, so it's a minor complaint, but I don't remember this being this bad 7 years ago, and I have footage of what it looked like 7 years ago, and it just looks better. It's baffling. Why did you have to rewrite all of this stuff? Now, something that I haven't mentioned yet is that the developers of Gigantic Rampage Edition are not the original developers. I don't know the entire story, and I frankly don't think it's that important, so I don't really care that much, but they somehow acquired the code and the rights to the game and were able to stand up servers and just make it work. I guess for some reason they had to recode the entire UI, but they did it badly. It's slick in some spots, but it just feels worse. Maybe that's the nostalgia brain talking, so, take this point with a grain of salt, so it just feels worse. Another minor annoyance is that if you're sitting there studying the scorecard, it will time out on you, and it will kick you out of that screen and back to the lobby. It doesn't care if you're finished looking at it or not. It's done with you. It's not 100% bad though, to be fair. There is now an auto-build UI for your characters and their skills and the order in which you want to select them during a match. Although there might be some argument that this takes away some of the tactical complexity, it does lower the barrier of entry for a lot of people, which I think is important for a game that is as complex as this one is, which I'm going to talk about in the next point. I'm pretty sure this didn't exist in the old version of the game unless it was added, closer to its death after I had already quit. But it is a very convenient feature and I do like it. I'm glad that it exists. These are the kind of things that add to the game experience and don't take away, so more of this, less of the stuff that's broken, please. Number 4, the game is generally obtuse. This was true back in 2017, and it's true today. Like it or not, gamers are impatient creatures. We don't like to not understand things, and this game is full of things that are difficult to understand at a glance, especially for a new player. It's hard to understand what a quote-unquote good choice is in this game unless you've been playing for a while or unless you watch guides. That goes with character builds, fighting enemy players, and the creature system, which I'm not really going to talk about because how it works is not important. But what is important is that choosing which creature to put where and why takes some thought. There's some complexity and depth in those choices, how to use your ultimates, what to use your ultimate resource on. A lot of this just isn't properly explained in the game. There is a tutorial, but the tutorial sucks. It doesn't give you a lot of information, and it doesn't give you more information about these more complex decisions that you have to make over the course of a long match. And as far as fighting enemy players goes, because there are so many different possibilities with the way that you can build these characters as they level up, it can be very difficult to figure out what they're capable of offensively with how they might kill you, or what they're capable of defensively with how they might not die when they're at a sliver of health and got away. Sure, your death as a result of chasing him down at 1% HP is probably your fault for overextending, but to be fair, if they're that low, you probably expected them to die a long time ago. Yes, this is a skill issue. I am willing to admit this 100%, but there's just not enough feedback in the game to let you know why a character is surviving, or why you died so quickly, or why you're constantly stunned, or why your stamina's not coming back, or even that you really need to do some proper stamina management. There's just not enough. There's just too much. It's not that there's not enough, it's just that there's too much. I'm a fan of games with a lot of complexity and a lot of build variety, but I think that allowing characters to completely change the type of build that they're able to do over the course of a match outside of items, and more through somewhat invisible skill choices, it's difficult to reconcile that with the character-based nature of these games. It's one of the reasons I don't really like Paladins, is because two players that are playing the same character can feel wildly different depending on how they build that character. That's more of a philosophical difference in the way that I think game design should work, so, take that with a grain of salt also. But the point is that it's difficult to understand what a good choice is in this game. That can be true in a lot of games, yes, but to keep new players around for a long period of time, you need to lower the friction in some ways. I don't know what a good way to do this in this game would be without dumbing it down in a way that ruins a lot of the game's character, but there isn't enough to keep new players interested and not feeling like they're stupid. And even as somebody who played 7 years ago, there's still a lot that makes me feel really stupid when I'm playing this game, and it can be pretty frustrating. And number 5, to add to the previous point, there's a new game mode called Rush, which apparently existed in the 7 years ago version and was added towards the end of its lifespan, but I hate this mode. A lot of people love this mode because it's a faster paced experience. You start at level 10 with your build fully realized, and you don't have to worry about creatures, so it's pretty alright for testing builds, it's good for testing characters, seeing if you like them, and it's good for just getting used to the gameplay. But the problem is that it doesn't really mesh with the type of game Gigantic is, or at least the type of game that I came to love 7 years ago. Gigantic is a bit of a slower paced tactical game. As quick and as frenetic as some of these fights can look that I'm probably showing you in the background, there's a lot that goes into them. There's the build up, there's the leveling up, there's the order of your build, the skill choices that you choose and the order in which you choose them. There's the decision on whether or not to use all of your ultimate resource on creating or upgrading creatures, or using them offensively for your ultimate abilities to wipe the enemy team. But in Rush, it's simply players versus players. That's pretty much it. It's just unga bunga, go punch the other guy in the face and hope you win. Matches are over in maybe 5 minutes. The longest one that I've seen was maybe around 10 minutes, but they're super short, whereas Clash, the main game mode of Gigantic and what it released with, those usually last around 20 minutes, and there's a lot more complexity with both the maps, the characters, the level ups, the creatures, everything. Unfortunately, when you first start Gigantic as a new account, you're forced to play Rush for the first 10 account levels. And because this game is what it is, there's not really much explanation on what it is to be in a Clash match versus what it is to be in a Rush match. And I think that starting new players with this faster game mode really poisons them on what to expect with the Clash gameplay, and makes it seem much simpler than it actually is. And that's not to the game's benefit, it's to its detriment. It also unfortunately serves to split the player base in between two completely different game modes, which also lowers the population in its own special way. And number 6, queues were terribly broken for the first couple of weeks. You would queue for a match, it would pop, and then you would hit OK, and you're like, yeah, I'm finally gonna get into a match, and then it's like, nope, somebody said no. But the reality is, somebody probably didn't say no, the queue just broke. And then the queue would pop again, and then it would do the same thing, and then the queue would pop again, and then it would do the same thing. So you have to go, and you have to cancel your queue, because you realize you're in a broken queue somehow, and then maybe it'll work this time, maybe it won't. It was like this for like 2 weeks. Super frustrating, super annoying, and it really made the game feel like it didn't want you to play it. Anyway, that's pretty much fixed now, so that's kind of a moot point. But it did sour the game's launch for a lot of people, and especially a game like this with a barrier to entry like $20, that's not something that you want to have. And number 7, to tack on to every single one of these, the fixes that this game needs are coming way too slow. Like I said, the invincible server-destroying bots were still around 3 weeks later. A lot of the terrain issues that I ran into while I was playing haven't been fixed. Patches aren't coming quick enough for a game that's brand new. For an online-only multiplayer competitive game, you kind of expect that whenever a developer releases these games, it's going to be like all hands on deck for the first few weeks while they put out fires and try to fix these more game-breaking bugs that are going to sour the experience. And because it's taking so long for any fixes to come through, so many people are running away from this game, never to return. And the reality is that games, especially as oversaturated as they have become, only really get one chance to impress people. If it's a brand new game and you launch it and it gives you a terrible experience, it gives you invincible bots on the enemy team, it gives you a difficult queue, and then you get into a match and you don't understand what's going on even 10 games later, you're just gonna leave. You're not gonna think of this game ever again. There's too much other things to do. There's too many other games to play. A first impression is so important in this market, and unfortunately, this has led to a lot of people with these minor conspiracy theories thinking that the developers who got their hands on Gigantic are just recreating this game for a cash grab, and I think that's ridiculous. I don't think that you take a game like Gigantic and you revive it, you put in the work to make it work again. You dive into a foreign developer's code, and I say foreign as in not from like other countries, but foreign as in it's not the code base that you know, that you're familiar with. You basically have to dive into this and learn it all from scratch. You don't do that as a cash grab. You don't rewrite the UI and introduce a ton of new bugs as a cash grab. There are millions of other ways to separate people from their money than putting in the development work and the server deployment work that's required to even do a project like this. $20 per copy does feel like a scam, especially considering the fact that it was free 7 years ago. But I don't think it actually was a scam. I don't think it's a cash grab. I think the sad reality is that these developers are just not talented. They don't exactly know what they're doing, and they're in over their head. They don't have the talent or the resources or the know-how to fix all of these things quickly, to deploy them quickly. And, maybe it's even Microsoft's fault and the way that consoles work, and Sony's fault and the way that you have to submit patches to them. This game is crossplay after all, so it takes time for those patches to be accepted and then uploaded to the PlayStation Network and then the Xbox Marketplace and all that stuff. I don't think that's an excuse, but it is probably one of the reasons. But regardless, a lot of these things should not have existed in the first place. There should be absolutely no conceivable way that there's invincible bots that are attacking both teams that you can't do anything about. These queues should not constantly be failing as much as they are. PlayStation players should be able to actually play and not worry that their console's about to get bricked because it crashed for the 16th time in the last hour. I think these developers care, I just don't think they have what it takes. Game development is hard, and I just think that they're in over their head. That said, there apparently still is a roadmap. There are still patches in the pipeline. I've heard talk of a big content patch coming up, And there are still players playing this game who are just hopelessly in love with it. And there's a lot to love about this game, even in the terrible state that it's in today. The art style is unique, the gameplay is incredible and unique, it's in and of itself. The colors are so beautiful, everything has so much imagination in it. It's such a shame that this game died the first time around. And it's such a shame that the developers that picked it up don't really seem to understand how to make it work. And it's also a shame that they had the gall to change it from a games-as-a-service game, a free-to-play game, to something that you have to spend $20 for. I will never understand that decision. I will never accept that decision as a good one. Please try to talk some sense into me. I know there's a lot of people who get upset at other folks who are trying to prove a game's death or demise or doom by bringing up Steam chart numbers. And yes, in some way, talking about a game's death is something that can help contribute to a game's death. People will see these numbers and see these cries of death and destruction and doom and think, there's no way that I'm going to bother trying to invest in this game that's doomed from the get-go. Why should I spend my time and effort learning something that's just going to be gone in like 5 months? But that's not what I'm trying to do here. To be clear, I don't think that the game is currently dead, even with the numbers that I'm sharing here, especially given the fact that, yes, it is crossplay, like I said. We don't know what the numbers on Xbox look like. We don't know what the numbers on PlayStation look like. All we know is what it looks like on Steam. And Steam is not even the only platform that it's available on PC. There's a few others, granted the numbers are probably pretty low over there too, because Steam is the biggest platform on PC, but my point is that the numbers that I'm showing you are a minimum. There are many more players on way different platforms that are helping bolster the numbers of this game. But the trend for Steam is still going down. And unless something drastic happens, it's going to keep going down. And I do not see a trend like this being any different on any platform. Chances are, this trend line is going to be the same everywhere. The fact is, this game is dying, and it's the developer's fault. This game that so many people love, that so many people are attached to, and that so many people were happy to see come back, is going to go through a very rare second death. I hate to say it, and I hate to see it. I think the moral of this story is, unless you know damn well what you're doing, probably don't take on a project like this. You're just gonna break people's hearts. Anyway, somber way to end it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.